Well, welcome to the Vicars Teapotcast. It's good to welcome you back. We've got a slightly different lineup in that we've welcomed a guest this week. More on him in a minute. To introduce myself, my name's the Reverend Chris Johnson, and I'm a priest in the Diocese of Leicester in Wigston, and that will become apparent the significance of that a little later. I'm going to begin by apologising for my internet connection, which is truly appalling today. So if it feels a bit stilted, it's not the conversation, it is genuinely the broadband, we promise. But such is life and such is the weather, it would seem, today. Josh, do you want to say hello and introduce yourself?
Yep, hello, and lovely to be doing another one of these. My name is Josh, and I am a priest in the Diocese of Rochester, of a church in North Kent.
And we have a guest with us today, the Revd Matthew Gough. I'll let him introduce himself in a minute, except to say that he is part of an illustrious line of placement students in Wigston, which goes back for church historians even as far as Robert Runcie back in the 1940s. So there you go, Matthew. Follow that one. Do you want to introduce yourself and say a bit?
Hello, thank you, Chris, and nice to meet you, Josh. My name is Reverend Matthew Gough. I'm in my first year of curacy. I'm not a priest. We don't know for sure when I will be priested because of the pandemic. So I'm in my deacon's year, and I'm wearing blue to distinguish myself from my esteemed colleagues there. I'm going for Methodist blue as opposed to Anglo-Catholic black, just to show how modern I am.
I'm only wearing a collar because Chris makes me.
Like the Father Ted bit, isn't it? About having to buy your socks from a clerical outfitters, otherwise they're just very, very, very dark blue. But I'm not sure what happened for you, Matthew. But never mind. So I mentioned at the beginning that I'm based in Wigston, and Matthew, you've been based and are based not far away. Wigston has a particular significance this week because on the 1st of June, which was Monday this week, it was technically St Wistan's Day. Matthew, you've become something of an authority locally on St Wistan. Do you want to tell us a little bit of the story of St Wistan?
Yes, thanks very much. As you say, I was based with you in Wigston. I lived in Wigston for many years, and I was quite intrigued. Why have we got two churches? And the more I looked in the main parish of Wigston Magnet, we've got two parish churches, and I was intrigued that one of them was St Wistan, and I thought, who is St Wistan? And the more I delved into it, I realised actually for Leicestershire, this is quite interesting. We've actually possibly got a saint, an Anglo-Saxon saint, from the year 849, when this man Wistan was murdered. So there's a great murder mystery attached to him at a nearby hamlet called Wistow, which means holy place in Anglo-Saxon language, holy place of Wiston. So I find it fascinating that this very ordinary town, Wigston, has this fascinating Anglo-Saxon history. Wiston was someone who was in line to the throne of the Mercian kingdom. So all of this area in the Midlands was the kingdom of Mercia until the Vikings and before the Norman conquest. And one of those princes in line was called Wiston, and he, we believe, was murdered nearby at Wistow, holy place of Wiston, and a shrine church was built in Wigston where I lived and where Father Chris ministers. And I thought, this is quite interesting. We need to find out a bit more about him. So the last 3 years, I've been trying to develop and cultivate interest. And part of that, and what we would have done if it weren't for the pandemic, as we've done the last 2 years, is have a pilgrimage where we followed the medieval route from Wigston, from Wistow, where he was murdered, to the small town of Wigston, where Father Chris ministers.
I mean, St Wistan as a Mercian king, I mean, sort of the Anglo-Saxon sort of kings and royalty, it was worthy of Game of Thrones, I think, really, wasn't it, in terms of being at risk of being bumped off by even distant relatives or those who felt they had some sort of claim on your power and throne, and Wistan was no different, really, was he?
Yeah, you're quite right. I don't know if anyone watching this or either of you ever watched the Amazon Prime series Vikings, but I was surprised to see Wistan even makes an appearance in that. Some of the detail is historically accurate, some of it isn't, because it shows him at the time of the Vikings, and Wistan was killed before the Vikings, so it doesn't quite work. But some of the truths are there about the Mercian kingdom being very divisive, and that's what's believed about Wistan. He fell out with a rival to the throne and was killed off in a typical kind of royal feud. But I think what makes him interesting to us from a religious perspective is that he gained sainthood. So, and why did he gain sainthood? What was it about him? And from what we understand, he was somebody who actually had turned away from his royal entitlement. He'd pursued a priestly life. He may have been a monk, as was the nature of a 9th century religious life, so belonging to a monastic community. He was believed to be quite holy, devout, and the reason we believe he may have been slaughtered was that he opposed the successor to the throne. With him stepping aside, somebody wanted, a cousin wanted to marry his mother, and Wistan believed, no, this is not righteous. Somebody who is so closely connected in the kind of culture and law of the land, that would have been considered incestuous. And so on both levels, in terms of turning away from a regal life, power, status, money, pursuing Christ, holiness, but also standing up for righteousness. So those are the kind of things those are worth investigating more. Themes that have relevance today: holy power versus political power, righteousness versus licentiousness.
And that's actually something I was going to ask about, Matthew, because when we think about the saints, obviously they often have these wonderful stories in their lives, but there's also that element of legacy. What have they passed on, and what can we learn from them? Anything you can tell us about Wistan on that front?
Yeah, so both those things really. That for anyone to be given sainthood, they'd have to have miracles associated with them. And so what I've learned from an Anglo-Saxon historian is that there was quickly established a strong sense of pilgrimage to Wistow, where he was killed, Wigston, where there's a shrine, and Repton, which was the royal household. And you can go there today. There's a mausoleum, there's a crypt where Wistow was finally laid to rest. But he was considered to have miraculous miracles associated with his place. So when he died, a shaft of light came from the heavens. Each day on his saint's day, Chris said it's this week we celebrate his death, June the 1st. His hair grows from the ground, allegedly, because he was believed to be decapitated. But most importantly, I think most of interest to the medieval pilgrims, where they found Wistow was a place of healing, hence holy place. They came and were healed. So I think those kind of things are quite interesting and not untypical for people we know who have been made saints. But I think, particularly think about our time at the moment, the political crisis we're in with Cummings and Johnson, and just seeing actually the church wanting to speak out against it and being silenced. And actually, no, we have precedent. And I think Wistan is someone who's actually quite useful in saying, speak out against political power. So I think that's a powerful message that is quite useful to hear. Actually, the status, the wealth, the materialism of this world is nothing compared to the riches offered by following our Lord.
There's that sort of sense with Wistan, isn't there, of the holiness of life, is that you can literally have all the power of the kingdom, but actually, no, I don't really want it, says Wistan. I'd far rather have what has true value. I think that's a really interesting point for today, really, isn't it? And just sort of how we attribute value to things. That's really interesting. Because as I said, you've sort of developed quite an interest in Wistan over the last few years, and I think that sort of led you down a few different paths, hasn't it? The sort of ideas of pilgrimage and what that might mean for us in the present day.
Yeah, I think there's lots of potential here. So Wixton, where Chris and I have both ministered, is quite a kind of humble place, quite a just ordinary town, really. People are perhaps a bit understated, and I think to have a sense of civic pride. So I think it could be a really exciting thing for Wixton to have a historic, ancient heritage. That would make it quite unique. Leicester's got itself on the map for its Richard III medieval heritage. Well, even before that, look at the Dark Ages. Let's go back to the Anglo-Saxon times. We've got this medieval prison. Leicestershire doesn't have any saints. So here you've got someone who's a saint. But to help with that, we've unearthed some of the ancient medieval pilgrimages that existed across Leicestershire. So we've been talking with pilgrim leaders and historians about, actually, you could make a really reasonable route from Hallerton, a place of another medieval saint, Wixton, Wistow, Richard III in Leicester, go all the way up to Repton in Derbyshire. And this could be the next kind of Spanish Santiago de Cruz. This could be St. Cuthbert's Way. This place where we are at could be very exciting. So, Josh, leave Kent, get here. You heard it here first. This is the next kind of revival. The Reformation did a lot of harm to the medieval pilgrimages, and I think it's time we bring them back.
You need a catchy title, though, like Santiago de Compostela. What's it going to be called? The Wixter Trail?
That's a great one. At the moment, the campaign is Wixton, a saint for Leicestershire, ? Hooking them in, getting people interested. But yeah, I don't know, you're right, Wistow Trail. The Wistow Trail. I think if we go beyond Wixton and Wistow, it's about the other saints as well and the medieval. Rothley was apparently one of the big medieval centres for pilgrimage. Unbelievable. So I think we could get the whole of Leicestershire behind us on this, and this could be, like the Northumbrian community, something big happening in Leicestershire.
Absolutely. I think we're a bit bored of digging up car parks in this part of the world, so we could probably do with something sort of more original for a pilgrimage trail.
Yeah.
Really? Yes.
Yeah, what has Richard III ever done for the church? I don't know, but Wistow, at least he stood up for holiness. He had a religious life. Maybe Richard did as well, but that's not what comes to mind, is it? He's the last king to have got killed. Whereas Wistow, yes, got killed, but he had a commitment to a monastic life. I think that's very interesting. Whereas of a religious persuasion.
Yeah. Yeah. So just one final thing, Matt. I suppose with your passion for pilgrimage, what would you hope to encourage people in the present day? What's the sort of the moral of pilgrimage, perhaps, for the present day that we can draw out?
Thank you for that. I think that's a really important question. I think it's quite telling. I've just done, and please do check it out, a St. Wistan virtual pilgrimage on YouTube. Just have to search St. Wistan pilgrimage, or we've got a Facebook group, St. Wistan pilgrimage. And it's interesting. What are the films that get looked at mostly? I've called one of them The Good News, and we've been very kind of evangelistic in one of the short clips. It hasn't got as many clicks, and it's interesting. Yet the historical basis, people are interested in that. So I think we've got to be contextual. We've got to be interesting. I think generalising, people are put off by our Victorian churchmanship, which is often, when we think about traditional church, very Victorian type churchmanship. Yet the ancient ways are a mystery to many people. And I think in our modern consumerist age, engaging with nature, seeing God through creation, pilgrimage, a sense of journey, moving together, learning, exploring, having conversations that you never would anticipate having, trusting God to use through that. So a very kind of naturalistic way to engage with God. And I think it should be incumbent on us all to be interested in that, really, as a way that this is a very inclusive way that we may not get people along to our churches, our events, but actually let's go out together, let's walk together, let's journey together, let's pilgrim together, and let's hope that God will bless our conversations in doing so, and that we will learn something about ourselves. I think that's exciting, and I think it appeals to our modern age without being too prescriptive from a Christian point of view about how do we convert people. Let's people find the kingdom through this journey together.
Excellent. Well, thank you, thank you, Matthew. I suspect we're probably about time to draw stumps, but thank you for that little insight into Wistan, a saint for Leicestershire. I can see the Heritage Lottery bid going in now. I can just imagine the way signs and all sorts. Yeah, I think there's got to be some mileage in that somewhere. Okay. Well,
Captured the vision. Well done.
well, it's been good to see you, Josh. Good to catch up with you as well. I'm sure there's enough. Well, there's certainly enough
Nice to meet you.
Kentish pilgrimage between Canterbury and the Augustine Way and all sorts. So I'm sure there's must be something in your part of Kent that you can enjoy as well.
Not to mention the fact that my church is that of St. Nicholas, one of the better known saints.
Yes. You might get a gift if you go on the pilgrimage with yours. Yeah. Anyway, Matthew, thank you for joining us and for those insights. And
No, pleasure.
yeah, and good to see you all. Good to see you,
I hope you have me back.
Thank you. That would be lovely.
Okay.
Brilliant. Have a good day.
Nice to
Cheers.
meet you, Josh.
Nice to meet you. Take care.
Goodbye.
Okay, thank you.